Hey everybody, it's so nice to see you again. Today I wanted to talk a little bit about harm reduction. So just to define harm reduction is the principle that people engage in all different types of behavior that's sometimes not very healthy for them. And the notion of harm reduction is, how do you help support people do less harm to themselves or do put themselves in less danger despite the fact that they continue to do something harmful. So the classic example of this in terms of drug addiction is, if you are going to be an injection drug user, to make sure that you have clean needles to use and that you don't share needles. But harm reduction really can go way beyond needle exchange and needles, which are incredibly important, or making sure that you have Narcan if you are going to use, which is also very important. But harm reduction could also just mean, in terms of your own behaviors, how you could do less damage to your emotional, physical, spiritual well-being, despite the fact that you should continue to engage in a behavior that may not be very healthy for you, like drinking alcohol or using other substances. So some ways that can look are that you decide to use less. And some strategies people use to use less are just to buy less when they're seeing their dealer, or to try to extend the amount of time between when you use. For other people, harm reduction can also look like just not giving up a drug completely, but just deciding that you're going to be drug free for a period of a week or a couple of weeks, just to allow your body to detox a bit. Although I will warn you, if you are somebody who's using opioids and you decide not to use for a prolonged period of time, like over a couple weeks, and you go back to using, you actually should be using less, because you won't need as much and you're increased risk for overdose. So that's another good time to have Narcan. Harm reduction can also mean that you decide that you're going to use in a safer situation. So you're never going to use alone. You're always going to use with friends who can call for help if you need it. Harm reduction might mean that if you are using with a friend, that you call an ambulance if somebody if someone uses and they overdose, knowing that, especially if you're here in Georgia and in many states across the country, that there are amnesty laws in place, so you don't necessarily get in trouble if authorities are called, as long as you're trying to save somebody's life. Harm reduction can also mean that you decide, if, let's say, you're drinking, that you drink less hard alcohol. So instead of drinking liquor, you drink beer or wine. Those still have alcohol in them, but even just the nature of beer, since it's carbonated, you might not drink as much in a given night, because it's not as concentrated as something like vodka or tequila or any of the other kind of hard liquors. Harm reduction might also mean that you decide to, if you're drinking, eat and drink plenty of water before you decide to use, just so you have something in your system to absorb it and you're less likely to get as intoxicated or as hungover. So for those of you who are continuing to engage in the choice of using drugs or alcohol, I encourage you to consider ways that you can reduce harm to yourself, even despite the fact that you decide to use. Be well.